Welcome. Today I'm going to be telling you how I found Recoil to work in Battlefield 6 and how to find the right gun for you. So each weapon class has a different take to how recoil works. For example, the assault rifles have harder recoil because they deal better damage at range, whereas the SMGs do worse damage at range, so they have a lower recoil. The carbines are kind of a perfect middle ground between the two, whereas LMGs have a bigger mix because they get hit with the hardest ADS speed in the game. Obviously, snipers and DMRs and shotguns work differently due to being more unique, and recoil on a shotgun doesn't really matter because you're going to be shooting people 2 meters away from you anyway. So, for this video, I'm going to be using SMGs, and I'm going to be mainly talking about the PDW7 / the MP7 here. And I mainly want to talk about your foregrip because there's a high chance you're spending a lot of attachment points on them and not really getting much value from them. Or, well, worse value than you think. So if we come over here to my underbarrel, I'm going to be spending 25 for this one right here, what significantly reduces my recoil and brings my control stat up to 74. Was great, and obviously you can even go higher than just 25 and up to 45 or 35 for other attachments. And if we were to bring this into the game here and also shoot it for a second, you can see it's a very, very accurate SMG. The problem with that is I'm spending, as I said, 25 attachment points for this minimal of a difference here. I'm not really pulling down or controlling it or basically doing anything other than a very small amount, but even if I wasn't to and I was just to shoot straight here for a whole magazine and then I was to go ahead and equip it and then do the exact same thing, as you can see the difference isn't too much. Maybe when you're not using it you kind of get to that point of the gun getting a bit more jittery, a bit quicker, but you're never going to be in a situation where that really matters, especially with SMGs. So I'm going to come off of the MP7 for a second, and I want to talk about the KV9 / the Vexor here. So without a foregrip, and this is a gun that you're going to be using much more closer due to only having 18 rounds in the chamber, up to 26 on an extended mag, but most of your gunfights are probably going to be taken within about the 20 meters radius, because that's where this one's going to thrive. You get a quick kill, you pop a quick reload, and you repeat. That's kind of where this gun thrives. So why would I ever, on a gun that has that little recoil anyway, turn around and use a 25 point attachment here for that minimal difference? My engagement range isn't changing at all because I have a little bit of an attachment that's increasing my range. Sure, if I ever am in a longer gunfight, like this guy over here, I probably could take it a bit better with this attachment, but I'm still going to be running out of ammo just as quick as if I didn't. So, I mean, I think I did more damage even without the attachment there. My point here is engagement range compared to what type of weapon you're using to its control. So, a gun like the KV9 has 61, and the MP7 has 62, and a gun like the SL9 also has 61. But the major difference is that the SL9 has a significantly lower rate of fire than both of these guns. And honestly, it's, I believe, the second lowest rate of fire, other than the UMG 40 here, in the entire class. And when you're using an SMG, obviously you want a pretty decently high fire rate. And on a gun like the SL9, without a grip, you can still take those longer gunfights and win them a lot because of how the SL9 works. You are trading off a little bit of that damage, again, for recoil, but to make up for that, you're doing, pretty decent damage with decent recoil. It's basically almost kind of like a pocket DMR, or a pocket carbine, rather. And if I was to put a grip on, sure, it's going to make even the best guns better, do not get me wrong, but I don't know if I want to be spending 35 attachment points for that little difference when I can still take those gunfights at this range with this gun and still win. So instead of spending 35 for something as simple as that, I could put these attachment points into other things, like maybe better bullets, or a mag catch, or a laser, for example. And this goes for pretty much every single weapon in the game, depending on what class you're using and depending on how you want to use it. Obviously, certain guns, you don't really want to be taking massive range fights anyway, like the M433, because of how this gun works naturally. So, being realistic, you're probably going to have a smaller scope on it, and you probably want to run something like a foregrip, because its base control is all the way down to 40. Precision, I think, is another thing to keep an eye out for, because I think that kind of controls your bloom a bit more. But on a gun like the M433, you want to have a foregrip on because it has a lot of recoil anyway. But even if you weren't to use one here on this gun, for example, you can see how different that is, just like that. So yeah, using a foregrip on a gun like this makes a lot of sense. But using it on a gun like the AK-205, if I was to take this one off, I'll also just remove this, make a one-time scope just for accuracy here. If I was to take this off, it still comes with a 65 control, what is absolutely insane. I mean, look at this thing, it's barely moving. And if I was to go ahead and put on a slightly reduced, for example, it's not going to make any difference because this gun is so accurate anyway. You're basically, what I'm trying to say here is when you're customizing your gun, factor in three things: its control, its rate of fire, and its damage. Because you can use a weapon that is probably going to have decent damage with a high control, but maybe a slightly lower rate of fire, like the SL9. You don't need to run a grip on that. The same, you don't need to run a grip on a gun like the PDW7 that, sure, has lower damage, but it's got a brilliant rate of fire and a really, really good control anyway, coming in at 62. Whereas other guns, again, using assault rifles for an example, like the M433, comes in with a pretty damn low control at 40. So you want to invest over there. Whereas a gun like the NVO, I think, has a pretty decent control. Or even like the SAW right here, comes in with 51 base stat. So you can take that into longer gunfights, and you're probably going to win them over not... obviously you're going to win more using something that significantly reduces it, because congratulations, you can now aim better. But if you're confident in your ability and you like your gun enough and you know what you're doing, what I'm basically trying to say is look at your control stat, look at your rate of fire, look at your damage, and maybe look at your precision. And that way you'll be able to find a gun that feels great for you, doesn't have much recoil, and if it does, go ahead and use a foregrip. But one thing I noticed with this game is a lot of guns come with pretty small magazines, and even with extended mags, don't really get too crazy. So for example, the M4 here only goes up to 40. What is still great, don't get me wrong, but I think I'd rather, on a gun like the M4 again, that doesn't really feel like it has too much recoil, I think I would still rather take something like the foregrip to make those engagements a bit easier over having the bigger magazine, because the bigger magazine isn't going to create such a crazy difference. Like, sure, I can take those mid-range gunfights with this carbine, but I think I'd rather have something that is going to make my accuracy better, because this gun does have an existence of recoil. Again, I'm mainly trying to talk about like assault rifles over here and SMGs, but the carbines are just a very good way like to talk about the middle ground. Basically, what this all comes down to is when you're building your gun, please test it out in the firing range with a foregrip and without a foregrip, and even test it out in a game with a foregrip and without a foregrip, because upwards of 45 attachment points is literally insane, given if I was to take those points on a gun like this MP7 and instead I put them into something like over here, like in my blue laser, I can put 30 points over there. I still would typically have enough for a thing there, but I'm using my 40 round magazine. But I can now take these type of gunfights, typically hip firing, over if I was to, obviously you don't want to hip fire every gunfight, but if I was to not have that, I can barely take this fight if I wanted to hip fire. And I don't know about you, but I trust in my hip fire quite a lot. I'm a hip fire type of guy. So again, what I'm trying to say here is when you're customizing your gun, just try without a grip and try with the grip. Just see how you get on with it for a game, and who knows, you might save yourself upwards of 45 attachment points, and you might be able to build around with your gun and find something better. Anyway, thank you for watching.